I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams at that point that 40 years later we would be reminiscing about those days. But the very first summer seminar, Richard Beach, our spiritual dad, didn't have much to work with. We were a pretty unsightly and uncorrigible group of people. Bob Belts and I used to take turns teaching Bible studies, and then we'd climb up on the routines, drink Coors beer, and talk about how spiritual we were.
Love you, and I love the way you love me, but quit making me pray. So Mike, icthus house, tell me first of all, what influence would you say it had on your life?
Well, I mean, it set the whole foundation of my spiritual life. I mean, I'm a brand new believer, three weeks old in the Lord, right off of FCA camp, and it's Bob Leylightner and Richard Beach, Bob Belts. That's who I run into, and they get a hold of my life, and they told me how much value I had to God and what I could do with God, and how important the little things that I would do in my life, how important they were to the Lord. But I mean, he gets hold of the individual, convinces that individual how important they are to God, right, and what kind of destiny they can have. And Bob has this selfless preoccupation with this guy's greatness, and he forgets himself.
That's right.
That is the most remarkable story I've watched for 40 years, this story in his life. Right. He is preoccupied with the greatness and the potential of another person.
When I came on staff at Colonial Pres in 2004, no one ever articulated the 5 pillars of icthus for me. By that time, nobody sat me down and said, hey, this is what we do, this is how we do it. And so when I was asked to do this video, when I was asked to come and share and reflect about the 5 pillars of icthus, I remember thinking, what are the 5 pillars of icthus? And I believe it was Craig McIlvaine who wrote down on a whiteboard, well, here they are. And it's like, I've never seen these or never heard of these, but as I started to reflect a little bit about specifically my time at Colonial and my interactions with Bob, it's like, oh, I've seen this before. I know what this is. For example, the whole idea of ministry is relational. When I first arrived on staff, Bob kind of pulled me aside one day and said, hey, look, Walker, student ministry is really easy. You pray for kids and you hang out with kids. Please don't complicate it. And I remember thinking, okay, that's what I'm here to do, and that's what I'm going to do. And in that, he was basically saying, hey, ministry is relational.
A lot of what we implement within the student ministry is relational evangelism and relational discipleship. That's the model that we use.
Of course it's relational. That's what ministry is, isn't it? He walks in the Spirit, and he walks by faith, and then he loves people, and he listens to people. He told me once, you go in, basically you look for the person that no one's talking to, and you make them, basically you go make them feel like the most important person in the room. And I've seen Bob do that again. And he loves people and wants people to feel included. So ministry is relational. It kind of oozes through every pore of the whole ministry.
Kind of earning the right to be heard and building relationships with students and doing contact work with them so that they might be more receptive to the gospel of Jesus. And so that's, a lot of what we do is we go and we meet students where they're at on their turf and get to know them where they're at instead of necessarily inviting them into a program. It's one thing that Bob taught me. When I was first on staff at Colonial, he said, Center High School Center High School Young Life meets in our building on Monday nights, man. Maybe you should go check it out and start to get to know some of those kids. And so, the next week I just showed up at Young Life like a fish out of water, and eventually I got to know some of the guys better and better, and started to being able to share the gospel with them. And some of those guys started coming around Colonial more and coming to church on Sundays. And so for me, it was Bob's advice that, started with, maybe you should go out and try and meet those students where they are and try and build those relationships with them, that allowed me to get to know them better and invite them into a community of faith on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, and being able to disciple them. And one of those guys has gone on to be on summer staff here at Colonial, and it's just been an awesome opportunity to get to know him better. And then he's reproduced that same model, and he's gone on to disciple other kids.
Bob has an amazing ability to take an interest in another person. And when I was just learning how to share my faith, I was excited about Jesus and wanted to be able to share him with people. I would watch how Bob would interact with kids that he met for the first time, and he would just focus in on them, really ask them questions that he seemed to really want to hear the answer to. And again, modeled, this is what it looks like to take an interest in love of another human being. And I've tried to do that in my ministry ever since. And I think about Bob's example many times when my mind's drifting off and I'm not paying attention to somebody. I'll think at times about how Bob could zero in and make you feel like you're the most important, most special person in the world. And when he was doing that, he was really modeling Jesus Christ, because we really are the most important, exciting people to him, to Jesus.
He just regularly and consistently and faithfully did the things that ultimately mattered, because they're about relationships. They weren't about being the best expert at anything, but it's about being loving and about being prayerful and about being present in the life of others. And that's shaped me.
What have I said before? If Richard was the Marx of Christianity, if Richard was the Marx of icthus, then Bob has been the Lenin.
Richard Beach had such an indelible impression on my life that I'd been teaching and preaching the Christian faith for several years before I ever took a preaching class. And I was in seminary in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, when I took my first preaching class at Regent College. And if you've ever had the experience of going to a preaching class, you know what it's like. You stand up and give a sermon in front of your classmates and your professor, and then they sit around and shred whatever little bit of confidence you had. And that was my experience, except the one thing that I remember so clearly, I'd never seen myself on a videotape preaching or teaching before that experience. And the thing that just really captured was, although it was me in the video, I felt like in some ways I was looking at Richard Beach. The way I handled myself, the way I gestured, the way, at least part of the way I talked, although I could never claim to be a teacher to his scale, I could see him in me. And that really is what discipleship is all about, and what the icthus ministry is all about. It's about the ministry of discipleship. A person implanting and imparting the gift of Jesus Christ from one life to another life. And that really is, at the end of the day, what ministry is all about. Jesus.
And I remember when Bob sat across the table from me at dinner, put his hands up to his face and said, "I just think we will be friends for a lifetime or forever." And I thought, this is kind of funny, man, talking to me about being friends forever. But you know, it has changed my life and introduced me to Jesus and sent me on a path that was really different from where I would be now had I met Bob and had the encounter at Denny's.
It always impacted me with young people. He would see past where they were and see what their potential could be if God got a hold of their lives.
I cannot begin to imagine where my life would be today if it were not for the influence of Colonial Presbyterian Church, former senior pastor Ted Nissen's insight and drive to hire Richard to be a gifted youth pastor, who would in turn touch Bob Leyleitner's life, and so many of us that have gone on to serve Christ in so many different ways.
All right, here we go.